Well, thank you for joining us today on this historic first ever online PDS hosted by the Center at Auburn Online. I'm Diane Boyd. I'm the director of the PDS Center for the Enhancement of Teaching and Learning.
And I'm Chandra Bowers. I am an instructional designer for Auburn Online.
Great. So we have the next hour to talk about aligning the design with you, which is a strategy for making your course design efforts streamlined and result in greater student learning. We'll take a look at the workshop objectives. I won't read these to you, but take a look at them and think about what we hope will come out of today is that any tweaks in your course planning might inspire you to measure the difference in student learning or your own satisfaction, which is what leads to scholarly teaching. The process will involve thinking about the big ideas of the course. We'll practice working with student learning objectives, and we'll get a taste of strategies or activities that lead to improved student achievement.
So when you start thinking about designing and teaching your first course, it can be sometimes a little confusing, maybe a little overwhelming, particularly if you're planning your first online course. You're thinking about who your learners are, what is it that you want them to know, what content are you going to present it, how are you going to present it to them, how are you going to know they learned what you wanted them to know, how are you going to give them feedback. There's all these questions swirling around in your head. So we're going to give you a process that's going to help systematically plan out the design of your course and how you find all that information out. And while I do represent Auburn Online, and that's what this graphic kind of presents to you here, all of the principles and practices that will be suggested will be applicable to all modalities. So we're going to start with the idea of course mapping. Course mapping ensures that you're helping students to achieve the learning that you intend for them and allows for analysis of fit between your curriculum and your assessment, making sure you identify gaps and repetition within your curriculum. The idea of to begin your course with the end in mind came from Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it just means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. And what is our destination for teaching any course of any modality? Learning. So to have a clear goal helps us as educators to focus our planning and guide our actions towards those results, which is student learning. What we're going to talk about creating is the idea of a course map or matrix. It's a planning tool, it's a communication tool to your students, it's a pedagogical tool so you can decide, what strategies that you're using. It's an editing, auditing, and validating tool to know that you are accomplishing what you intend to accomplish. The course map that you see here is an example of how this kind of matrix might be constructed. You can include this in your syllabus or in your course, put it online. That way students have a very clear understanding of what they should be learning. And it gives you an opportunity to validate, again, your outcomes and making sure that all of your strategies and resources are effective. This is just one example. There are lots of different ways that you can actually create a course map or matrix for your course. I'll give you just a moment to kind of look through that and see if anybody has any questions thinking ahead. Do you have any questions?
So not only is it beneficial to redesign the course at the course level to promote your own satisfaction and your students' learning, it can also serve as a research project. And in 1990, Ernest Boyer wrote Scholarship Reconsidered, where he talked about the scholarship of teaching and learning as a legitimate form of research in its own right. I'd like you to take a look at this next set of bullets that discuss all of the ways that you can interrogate your new course design to see if it's efficacious. So you'd be able to make small tweaks to the course using this backwards process that we're going to talk about, and then measure whether students are learning more, if the aspects of your course mutually support one another and are integrative. figure out what areas might benefit from changes. And as instructors, we're well aware of the parts of the course that our students struggle with, and that's a great note upon which to think about redesigning. And then you can help other instructors learn from your sage wisdom in the form of a publication, which you would then get some form of credit for in your promotion and tenure or your annual review documents.
All right, so I want you to akin yourself to a fabulous artiste creating a masterpiece. Like a sculptor who chips away at everything that's not the sculpture. This backward design process that we're going to be talking about here is a way for you to achieve your end product. In 1949, Ralph Tyler introduced the idea of backwards design without actually using that phrase. His emphasis at the time was on creating and using a statement of objectives that drive the decisions about assessment and instruction. It wasn't until 1998 that Grant Wiggins and Jay Mateague introduced the phrase backwards design in their book, Understanding by Design, and they made the approach much more well known. Backwards design challenges the traditional method of developing a course, which is more sequential in nature. We usually start with looking at a list of topics or of the content that we want to present. We plan out activities. Some of us have our favorite activities that we like to do. And then we end with the evaluation methods. So backwards design kind of flips that around and takes a look at it in a different way. The idea of backwards design is to teach towards the endpoint or our learning goals or outcomes, which is typically a way that we can ensure that the content is focused and it's organized. By focusing on big ideas, principles, theories, concepts, points of views, or themes, students can understand why they're studying the topic and not just memorize facts. That's one of the benefits. By deciding on those outcomes and determining what evidence will demonstrate that student learning through various assessment methods and instruments before you ever plan a lesson, you can be sure that the instruction drives students to what they need to know rather than just focusing on activities. According to Quality Matters, which is a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to quality course design in the online environment specifically, but these principles can be applied to any course. Critical course elements working together to ensure students achieve the desired learning outcomes is known as alignment. Kind of like the cogs of a wheel inside of your watch. They're all working together. It's a congruence or a match between curriculum, assessment, and instruction. And I want you to think very quickly about what happens if those components are misaligned. If the assessments are misaligned with the learning objectives or the instructional strategies, it can undermine student motivation and the learning outcomes that you intend. For example, if your objective is for students to learn how to apply analytical skills, but your assessment measures only factual recall, then the students who practice their analytical skills can be frustrated when they take the exam and it doesn't measure what they studied and they practice. Another example is if your assessment measures students' ability to compare and critique the arguments of different authors, but your instructional strategies focus on summarizing the arguments in class through discussion, through a paper, then consequently the students don't learn to practice the skill of comparison and evaluation that's going to be assessed later on. So it's really important that you align your curriculum with your assessments and your instruction. So there are some key questions that you can ask yourself as you're beginning this backwards design process and creating your course map. And those are, what do I want my students to understand and know and be able to do? That's the first thing. How do I check that they have actually learned it? And which activities will lead students to the desired result? So if you ask those questions, they align with the backwards design process, which tells us the first thing that we want to do is identify the desired results. And we'll talk about what those are, the big ideas and the skills. We'll discuss those here in just a moment. The next step would be to determine acceptable evidence. What is the culminating task that pulls together all of the the learning that has taken place. And then lastly, to plan the learning experience and the instructions. What are the specific learning events that will help them to achieve the desired results?